guys, welcome back to this segment of the Urban Okie. I have a special guest today. His name is Ron Ralls, and for those of you that follow the reining cow horse world, he's no stranger to you, and for those of you who are involved in barrel racing, he's quickly becoming a household name as women are clamoring to get a spot with Mr. Ralls. And I know him because I married into the family that he belongs to. So I strong-armed him and asked him if he would sit down with me and answer some questions. And the reason I wanted to do that is because his story, unlike so many people in the horse world, is unique and hard-earned. And the humility that this man has and has always sustained on his journey to becoming the world's greatest horseman is what I find most amazing. He built everything himself, and I want him to tell a little bit about his backstory, about how he came to be who and what he is today, because it's a pretty cool story. So, I think everybody would be curious to know about your earliest days, about how you got started. And a couple years ago, you told me a story about how your place in the pecking order of your siblings had a lot to do with you becoming the horseman that you are. Would you share?
Oh, about that I couldn't whip any of them?
Yeah, that one.
Well, they were all older and bigger at that time. They've added some to it since, but at that time they were all older and bigger. Primarily Steve and Van. Anyway, so the only way I could get ahead of them was I made it my business to ride better horses than they did. So that's kind of how it just, I had some, they rode them like they were just tractors, and I rode them like I wanted them to be better. That's the only way I could get ahead of them. I couldn't, that's the only option I had. That's kind of how my interest in horsemanship, I think, got started right there because of that. Anyway.
So, tell me a little bit about your youngest days, or what you can remember, because I'll tell you, I didn't grow up in the horse world, the rodeo world, the equine world, and so I think I see that world from the outside in a little bit differently than those people who've always been a part of it see it from the inside out. And one of the things I see is a lot of people, they just start with the fanciest horses or the fanciest barns, or they were just given a lot. But I know that's not how you started. How did you start when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, or when I started the horse training?
No, just when you started riding horses. Your first, earliest memories.
At the time, we were actually living in Bakersfield, and I don't know, I was 8 or 9 years old maybe. I really can't remember, I was just a kid. And I got home from school, and the place where we were living at the time, it's before we got moved to the ranch, but it had a front yard, a backyard, and then a big lot behind the backyard. It was probably, I don't know, 3 acres maybe, 4 acres. And I come home from school, and behind the backyard, there was 4 or 5 horses that had never been there before. And I remember the grass was green, and I walked out there, and the horses were there, and I'll never forget, this sounds stupid, but the smell of their breath from eating that green grass. And then my dad got home, and I don't really remember the particulars, but we've been horseback ever since. But I had ridden before, but it was a donkey and not horses. So anyway, And then he leased that ranch, and we moved there, and that's how it all got started.
Okay. Well, so you brought up the fact that your dad got home, and I've personally had people ask me questions about how we're related, or how the Snows are related. So my question is, who's your daddy?
My daddy is Lawrence Snow.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you. Patty thought that would be pretty funny. We agreed that'd be a really funny question to ask.
Yeah.
So, did you learn to ride under Lawrence?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's another common question I have, is how are Gary and Van and Ron all related? And the answer to that is that you guys all share the same father. What can you tell me about how Lawrence Snow affected you as a horseman, as a cowboy?
A lot. He was pretty much, he was fair, but he was real no tolerance to mistakes. Like in that country where we were at, if you made a mistake, it could cost a week's worth of work. Like you could be gathering cows up there on the mountain somewhere, throw a bunch of cows together. It's not like a flat country where you can go out and gather 1,000 head of cows before lunch. You might ride all day, every day, and only put together 40 or 50 head of cows. And it depended on what you were doing. If you were moving these cows off the mountain down to the low country or whatever, if you made a mistake and weren't where you were supposed to be, it could cost a whole week's worth of work. But so it was pay attention. I remember him always saying, you have to learn to think like a cow. If you know, he liked to ride. He always had good horses. For ranch horses, he made really good horses. And I think that was had a big impact on me wanting to ride good horses. It was kind of it wasn't a competition between me and him ever, but he rode good horses, he made good ranch horses. I wanted to do the same thing. And then with Steve and Van being how they were, that even helped me more to want to be that way.
So some of your story, I've heard it said that luck is just when preparation meets opportunity. So you spent a good portion of your adult life preparing, becoming a better horseman and working on that. But at some point, your path crossed paths with a pretty well-known horseman. And that kind of changed, I would say, the course of your fate. Do you want to share a little bit about that particular horseman?
Like Monty?
Mm-hmm.
I had been on a ranch, and I was probably, I don't know, 28, 29 years old, and I'd been home there for a while. I mean, I lived there, but I hadn't been anywhere, and I don't know, I just got it in my head, Van was living over at Sullivan, at San Ynez, that area, and he had a vet clinic there at Flagazette Farms, which is owned by Monty and Pat Roberts. And so he was doing all their vet work there. And I just got it in my head I wanted to go see Van. So anyway, I went over there and I spent maybe a long weekend there with him. And while I was there, I met Monty Roberts. And I talked to him a little bit, and he asked me before I left to go home if he had a couple of 3-year-olds that he would wanted me to take home and use on the ranch and then bring them back like in 6 months. He asked me if I'd be interested, and he'd pay me to do it. And I jumped on that because I was always broke at home anyway, never had any money, so I was going to get paid to ride these horses plus do my work anyway. So I took the horses and I stayed home with them for 6 months, and whenever I was supposed to bring them back, I did. And I brought him back and I rode the horses for him, and he told me that if I would move over there, that he would set me up in an arena and a barn, put horses in training with me, get me some outside horses from other customers, and if I would move over there. And I told him, I said, well, I'd like to do it, but why can't I just stay at the ranch and do it? And his answer, I'll never forget it, was, he said, because you will only ride as good as those who you ride around. And it didn't make that much sense to me at that point in time, but I thought about it, and it made sense to me. I knew what he was saying, so I went home and talked to my dad, and I think we were going through it hadn't been raining, and we were going to have to get rid of, I had my cows, my dad had his cows, and we were going to have to get rid of some cows, somebody. So I talked to him about this opportunity, and he said, well, you know, if you want to do it, do it. And so that gave me an opportunity to sell my cows. He didn't have to sell as many cows. And I moved over there, and that's how I got started doing it.